Good evening, YouTube. So tonight I'm going to be presenting a small sort of a desktop sculpture, and it's called Her Totemic. Bit of a long process story behind this piece, and I'll get into that. Definitely some info that some people will find revealing and new. So let's see. No further delay. Had a few lighting things going on tonight. Still in the sort of fledgling stages of learning about various settings, and there's a lot going on over here, just so you know. So this piece ultimately, this is the original sculpture, let's just say. It's been copper plated by myself, and ultimately this is how it went about. So the starfish is solid pewter, and that's a life cast from an actual starfish. And then the toad that has a face on its chest, as far as I know, that's also solid pewter. And then I put those two together, and I built this headdress out of microcrystalline wax, which is inside the copper plating. So there's no mold for this piece. The only mold is two separate molds, the starfish mold and the toad mold. And I guess the face as well. That's a third mold. So this is a composition, and the base, the piece of rust that it's sitting on, that's something I found in the desert on my way back from Texas. And it comes along with the piece, in case anyone's interested. I felt like it was I should have gotten more of this rust. It was quite a gold mine, and I'm sure the owner, who wasn't too far away, who I had just spoken with, wouldn't have minded if I hauled away 100 pounds of it. So that's a bit of a loss for the pack rat in me. But there it is, proof that it exists out there in the desert somewhere. There's a little bit of a focal thing going on with my camera. Hopefully it resolves itself. I think it's having a little bit of a emotional crisis trying to keep focused on a moving object. And I don't have the focus point locked on it. So here comes the story. So this piece, once I had it finished in the solid pewter elements and the microcrystalline wax, I did an experiment, and what I needed was an electricity conductive material that I could cover the piece with. So I wondered, is there such a thing as aerosoled carbon? Because carbon conducts electricity. And sure enough, there is. So I ordered a can of aerosoled carbon, and I carbon coated this entire piece. And in the ionic bath, which is electroplating process, it's a bit of a sophisticated setup, but there's very good YouTube videos on how to do it. And I won't go into super chemical electroplating and ion details. I'll let that be your discovery. But ultimately, you've got anodes and a diode, and you have basically a source where you conduct uh, your positive lead to whatever metal you're using, and then the negative source to the actual object itself. And it helps that the object is sitting on something that's also conductive. So I used a copper sling, let's say, for it. I built it out of flat copper stock that I bought from hardware store, and of course the hanging mechanisms. Uh, Everything's conductive, so a 5 gallon bucket or smaller, it could be whatever the size of the piece. The piece that you're putting in the solution should be maybe no more than a quarter to half uh, of the mass that it's going in. And so a 2 gallon container would be fine for this piece. 1 gallon is possibly doable as well, nonetheless. So you've got your source for ions, which is the metal uh, being ultimately forced away from a copper pipe, which was my source for the copper to translate or migrate to positive to negative. So the negative is the sculpture that's conductive, that's covered with carbon, and then the positive is the anode that is supplying the copper that's attaching itself to the sculpture. So I may not be explaining this as precise as I would like to, but this is what's coming off the top of my dome tonight. So this I left in the bath. Now there's another thing, agitation. So I put a fish aquarium pump next to the process, and I had leads going into the solution to keep the solution agitated. And the solution is basically what I got from the hardware store, which you can use, which is copper sulfate. They use that for stump removal. So there's a whole recipe as far as how much you use per the gallons of distilled water. So you need distilled water, and then a little bit of battery acid, which is something you can get at an auto parts store. And that adds a little bit of it gives some bite to the surface that the positive ions are going to be connecting to the negative. It just helps the migration of the ions stick a little bit better. So we're dealing with like microscopic process here, ionic sized things. So once the piece is submerged and the water is agitated by the fish aquarium pump, and you've got your amperage, your power source supplying a certain amount of amperage to the positive lead, the negative lead, of course, it remains static. It's the anchor point for the ions. And the process begins. Now, depending on how much you crank your amperage up going into the source material, things speed up and get more dynamic. And the longer you leave it in, the stranger certain things can turn out as far as third dimensional representations. So what happened with this piece is I took it out several times and looked at it. And I liked a lot the coral reef things that were starting to grow on it. And of course, these things only grow on the terminations, the outward appendages, the ends of the outward appendages, where the electricity is escaping from the object. And I thought that it went along with the context of the piece being totemic, sort of archaic, oceanic, old, ancient. You get the drift. Um, so I noticed these little nubs starting to grow, and I was wondering if I upped the amperage a little more and left it in longer, what it would look like. So I did. And I think I ran this at like 2 amps, maybe a little bit above 2 amps, which is a lot. And left it in for, I'm not sure how long. I would suggest, if you're doing this process, one, be very careful because you're dealing with electricity and amperages that are quite high. And so uh, be safe, watch a lot of videos, um, and don't rush anything. This process is very retentive, and you will make mistakes. Everything has to be dialed in on a very high level of cleanliness, precision, making sure your connections are clean. Uh, Everything is clamped on correctly. There's no loose joints. The wire you're using is all connected properly and top grade. I prefer, or I would advise, soldering connections, not just like clamping them on or tightening them on with screws. I would say that all your connections should be soldered, and always use a conductive uh, sling of sorts to submerge the piece down in. Some think that just putting the lead on the piece is enough, but I don't prefer to do that because it leaves a mark on the sculpture, and so I'd rather prefer to put the sculpture on something that's conductive and then put the leads on the sling itself. So the patina on this piece is natural. Um, I'm pretty certain I didn't put any kind of acid bath on this piece because uh, I don't have any as far as like patina. So this is the original patina that occurred as it was drying and open to the air, and oxidation started to occur. But it is archivally sealed, so this piece has been stabilized. Not something I would sit out in the hot sun for sure, but it's strictly an indoor piece, and it's quite fragile. So shipping this piece would be a little sketchy. There's ways to do it. Um, I would say a good 95% of this piece will make it through shipping. One of these little coral reef, you might get a little spot that falls off in vibration, but ultimately this piece will be quite sophisticated to pack. But uh, I've taken it from California to Texas and back and moved it around quite a bit, and it's pretty sturdy and uh, quite resilient. There's no story behind this piece. It's just pure inspiration for the sake of doing something beautiful and to create something that I've never seen before, and uh, it has a mood, and moods feed me. They anchor me. It's a kind of a therapeutic situation, and an object, particularly sculpture or anything with intent, can do a lot for an interior space. You'd be surprised. There's um, there's a big difference between getting something foo-foo from Target and sitting it on your nightstand versus something that has a totally different ideological reason for existence, let's say. Um, Something that has a soul, that has an inner body, that's not just done for the sake of interior design or decoration. So the coral pieces are extraordinarily detailed. This is definitely not something I would ever be able to sculpt by hand. I mean, maybe if I had a huge magnifying glass and some sort of surgical special equipment to build the layers, but I still don't think it's possible because there's nooks and crannies going on that only nature can create, the nature of electricity and ions. And so the ions, along with the electricity, they created children, these coral reef looking uh, uh, stalactites in a way. And I don't think I don't think that's a coincidence. I think there is something going on there with coral reefs and how they look and the Earth's magnetic uh, phenomenon, along with the salt water. There could be something going on there, a relationship of sorts. So this is Her Totemic, um, one of one, definitely never to be done again, nor would it ever look the same. I mean, this is something that happens once under certain circumstances, and uh, so it's quite unique. It's the only original sculpture I've ever copper plated or done this process with, but it worked. I would say a good 98 to 99% of the sculpture is copper plated, and it's quite thick, so it's pretty resilient. So I feel pretty complete with that story, and thank you for watching and subscribing to the channel. Please share the channel, and feel free to comment or ask questions down in the comment section if you are curious about metal plating and its applications towards sculpture or any other objects, because ultimately, if you have an aerosoled carbon, you can plate anything ultimately. Well, within reason. I mean, you it has to be a stable material. Um, like you can't copper plate a raw egg. That that's not going to happen. So thank you, and good night, possibly good morning to some, and until we meet again.